Welcome and long time no see. So tell us, what's your analysis for the industry after a year and a half of pandemic?
Hi, Robin. Well, firstly, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you here. And yes, long time no see. It was great to see you in Rotterdam a couple of weeks ago. So yes, as you mentioned, look, I'm going to talk to you about the state of the exhibition industry. Of course, we represent trade shows, exhibitions, not so much the conference or congress side of it, but certainly they are very similar in many ways. And of course, your member venues host both of these events. So, I'll be brief and then I think we can have some chat, and please do ask questions at any point. I'll be happy to sort of answer as we go along. I think it's worth reflecting first on where we were before the pandemic. So before the pandemic, the exhibition industry, had not really changed much in several decades. A very profitable industry. At the end of the day, we're selling space, but the format hadn't changed. The value proposition hadn't changed, and certainly our metrics hadn't changed. We measured ourselves in terms of square meters sold and revenue. So everything was going on rather well. We had record years in 2019. A small amount, but increasing amount of private equity coming into our market. Broadly, most around the world, we have the different parts of our value chain are the organizers, we have the venues, and then the suppliers. In some parts of the world, the organizers and the venues, are one and the same. So, obviously, along came the pandemic, and like most businesses, in fact, we were one of the very first ones to be closed. And if you think back to early last year, it was Mobile World Congress. Shut down, well ahead. This is when the pandemic was still in China and perhaps had not even been declared a global pandemic. And that really sent a warning shot across the bows that this was heading our way. And of course, surely enough, all of our events globally were closed down. So, what happens when, as an event industry, we can't organize our events? I mean, firstly, I'd just like to take credit because, I know many of your members also host exhibitions. We were with Trixie Loh-Meerman from Dubai World Trade Center was with us in Rotterdam a couple of weeks ago. Right now, in fact, we have a webinar taking place with João Nagy, who's the World Trade Center Sao Paulo. So, many of our venue members were called on to support, firstly as field hospitals, and latterly as vaccination centers. So again, credit to, doing our bit to support the pandemic. But really, when we can't organize events, what can we do? So, fundamentally, one of what we try to argue is that business events, and by this I mean exhibitions, trade shows, conferences and congresses, we are not mass gatherings. It depends where in the world you are classified. Here we are in the UK, and even to this date, a trade show in an exhibition in, for example, the World Trade Center is still classified the same as a wedding or Glastonbury Festival. And clearly that's wrong. Germany, on the other hand, very early on in the pandemic came out and said, no, business events are not mass gatherings. They have an important economic effect. They can be held safely. Of course, we put people first. We're used to dealing with large crowds. We have done, for many years. And we can run our events safely. We already do things like, time entry. We know who people are in there. We already have Wayfinder and tracking. We already have contactless swap of information and technology. So all of these things, we can open and reopen safely. Because, to look at the impact of what happened was, quite frankly, brutal. In our industry, one of the first to shut and one of the last to reopen. And in fact, if you look at, many parts of the world, they still have not opened, their exhibition and event sectors. I'm here in London, and most of Europe has in fact been, running events again since earlier in the year. Most of the States now are up and running again, but you look at Asia and of course what's happening in Australia or New Zealand or indeed Singapore and other parts of the world, China again with closed borders, and it's really hard for us to operate if we can't run our events. So to talk a little bit about sort of this pivot to digital, and here we are. I guess you would normally typically meet with your members, and that's really important part of what you do. But here we are on a Zoom conference again. There was much talk about it's the death of trade shows, which is similar to what people said 20 years ago. And of course, in the meantime, our customers, and by that I mean our exhibitors and the visitors, have had to adapt. We've all had to do Zoom. We've all had to try and keep communication and keep business open as much as we can with the tools that are available. And certainly we found that digital does have a lot of advantages. So, to run an event, if that's 3,000 or 30,000, by running a digital event, you can open it up to a much wider audience, and we're attracting new audiences from much further afield, and that's great. And we also found that people, in terms of content, people are very happy to consume content, in education, which is an important part of many conferences and congresses, and people can do that remotely. So that's great. However, on the other hand, on most of the business objectives, sourcing new leads, sourcing new distribution channels, finding new products, discovering new innovation in your industry, meeting your existing clients, etc., no, digital does not cut it. So thankfully, as things opened up again, and as our research has shown, and we do quite a bit of research in this field, our last study, which we published a month ago, was about 15,000 visitors and exhibitors around the world, shows that fundamentally there is no shift away from live, and actually quite the opposite. As you go and visit trade events that are happening again, people are really pleased to be back, and more than pleased, on a human and emotional scale. And as you saw, Robin, in Rotterdam, this was our first event in 2 years, and these are all quite senior level people, but a real emotional response from them, which we're human beings, we're social animals. So, but fundamentally, for the business reasons, until now, yes, you can do a conference online, you can have a members forum online, but you cannot, at the moment, digitize a trade show. And good luck to Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, but at the moment, no, people do not want to spend a day or 2 days, plugged into whatever it is, sourcing new products. So, as our shows, wherever they are able to open, are opening up again, we see that actually they're not that much different. So this vaunted, pivot to digital, hasn't happened yet. But this is short-term thinking. Globally, people have lost about 76% of their revenues last year, and up to 50% of their workforce. So of course, you need to open your doors, you need to run your shows, you need to get some revenue. In the medium to long term, well, yes, then of course we are going to see some changes. All of these kind of digital things that we've been doing do mean that rather than as an exhibition organizer organizing one big event and then sort of taking it easy, and do some learnings, and then 2 years later or 3 years later running another one, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of touch points throughout the year to keep in contact with your community. So that's great, and we'll see we'll see this rolling out in the coming years. But again, we're not even out of the pandemic yet. As I say, in Holland, where we were, even 2 weeks ago, there's new restrictions, introduced. It looks like Germany is tightening up again. So I sadly think we're going to have one more tricky winter before we come out of it in Europe. And yeah, hopefully our colleagues in Asia can follow suit soon. So last couple of points I want to mention before perhaps you have some questions. I mentioned the workforce. It's been, the human cost has been awful, on our industry. We've lost, a lot depending on where you are, but up to 50% of the workforce. And of course, it's hard now as things start up again to recruit them back. Not only that, but as I mentioned, the mega trend that are, running a physical trade show, you need your ops, you need your marketing, you need your sales. But now, if you're looking at kind of omni-channel, 365, a digital platform which supports, in various smaller events, which supports a large trade show, this is a different skill set. So our kind of physical world is colliding with the digital world. So this is different skill sets that we need. Certainly in terms of leadership, it's absolutely shaken things up. So one of the speakers again at our Congress was saying, previously, they'd have monthly revenue forecasts, and that was their kind of gold standard, monthly revenue forecasts. And at the end of the day, everything has been, as I'm sure all of your members know, you need a plan A, B, C, and D, and they stopped doing that. And we're now looking at different metrics, such as more customer focused and customer centric metrics, which will ultimately drive the revenue. So the leadership are grappling with these huge changes as well. But finally, our industry was a very stable place to work. On the exhibition side, perhaps not the most exciting. It's the least understood and not the most exciting, when you're talking about somebody at university age or whatever. But now you look at it and actually it's a threat. You look at the last 18 months will show you that our industry is very prone to disruption. It does not have stable prospects in the medium term. So that's going to be a problem to us. Yep. is the people. And the last thing I want to mention is around, again, the kind of the external issue of climate change and sustainability, which affects all of us in all of our lives and homes and work. But certainly in our industry, that has been a challenge. I mean, there have been some amazing initiatives, and many venues have been zero to waste for a decade or more. So it's not that we're behind the curve necessarily, but yeah, that is an existential threat, if you like. If you have a large international major trade show which relies on people flying in from all around the world. So if you're in Singapore, like 80 to 90% of their visitors and exhibitors come from international, because of course Singapore itself is a tiny state, and that's a threat, because we need to prove that. And there is some studies which Charlie McCurdy, the CEO of Informa, presented at COP last week, that actually traveling to a business event can save between 3 to 5 international flights because of the amount of meetings that you can gather in a short space of time. So this is something that, we, in all levels of what we're working on, we need to kind of get sustainability in our DNA, because yes, we've signed this pledge at COP, the net zero carbon events pledge, to get to by 2050. And yeah, if we can't lead that, then yeah, we'll no doubt be punished by our customers.
Yeah, many good elements, Nick. Thank you for that. And of course, we have very important constituents in our own organization in the exhibitions industry, and the whole notion of how to reopen safely is on top of everyone's agenda. That's what's very good to see. That also you at UFI reopened, right, safely, and the notion of getting together again. So this is also happening in a conversation with our members at the background of this virtual meeting. That's hopefully, knock wood, this is the last time we do this fully virtually. Like we're three-dimensional, as you said, and there's an eagerness for us all to come together in person. So I have just one brief question for a brief answer, which is really, you talked about the changing metrics of how to value. Because exhibition centers, the economic impact is always enormous on local and even regional, national economy. So what are these changing metrics? Really briefly, is that a move to more quality audience versus quantity, or what? Because living with the uncertainty and managing uncertainty is now a more critical skill than planning, right? Planning different scenarios. So what are those, very briefly, those changing metrics?
Well, I mean, actually, it's more to do with customer centricity. For example, we had a pre-pandemic a net promoter score among exhibitors, which was -17, which I think put us kind of below bankers and traffic wardens. So a real problem there. People, even though they agreed that beyond their own websites, going to a trade show was the best route to market for their businesses, for their products, to find distributors, etc. There was no loyalty necessarily, and a lot of dissatisfaction among our own customers. So if you're purely looking at how much can I squeeze my revenue, whether I have investors or whether I have partners, I need to get 2% each year, and just they'll come back and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to build the same thing. I'm going to change 5% of the show, put a little feature there, but ultimately it will be the same experience. That's not going to cut it. We need to now. And it's forced us to be closer to our customers, because none of us can meet, what do you want? What do you need? How can we help you deliver that? Because at the end of the day, we're data houses. What is an exhibition? It's a database, and a brand, a database and a logo. But we have both sides of the market, the buyers and sellers. So, I mean, what we're talking about now is in leadership, how you can categorize data and how you can act on that data. Fundamentally, though, right now, our immediate problem, though, is opening and closing, is quarantine. You know, without international travel, you can't have a trade show, and that's the immediate.
That's always the dilemma, because you organize an in-person event, and then a week before it's there to happen, borders shut down. So absolutely. So we have a couple of poll questions for the audience. So let's pull up our poll. So question 1: how confident are you that the exhibition industry will bounce back in 2022? Are you more likely to participate in exhibitions that maintain a hybrid approach or revert to in-person only? And 3, would you like the exhibition industry to continue its hybrid approach as an option beyond 2022? So let's give it a minute here and see what the audience thinks of, because the whole notion, of course, we didn't really go into that. You did allude to the virtual component, Nick, but the sort of the functionality of hybrid, whatever that means, of course, can mean many different things. Okay, let's see the results of the poll. All right, how confident? So let's say the majority is somewhat confident to very confident, and basically very few people are not at all confident. So I think that's a good sign for the industry. Are you more likely to participate when there is sort of a hybrid? It's kind of split 50-50, slightly tilting towards having the hybrid option. Probably gives people a bit more security that can actually participate if borders close again. And last question: would you like the exhibition industry to continue its hybrid approach? 73% says yes, that hybrid sort of component is a valuable option. So good, great. Well, thank you, Nick. Stay with us. We have an awards ceremony coming up with the Undersecretary of Commerce, so do stay with us. We're going there in about 2 minutes. So please look at the chat. There will be a link to go to our next session for the award ceremony. We're starting there in exactly 2 minutes. So I will give everyone about 2 minutes to switch and go to the next link, welcoming the Undersecretary Farrell, Undersecretary of Commerce. So see you there in a few minutes. And Nick, thank you again, and goodbye.
My pleasure.
And best regards to all our friends at UFI. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Thanks, Robin. Bye.
Bye.
As a reminder, please use the link in the chat to join our next session.